is going to mobilize the Democrats to actually vote for a flagging president who is destroying the economy right now. People will not be thinking, "Oh my God, the economy is going to shit." They will not be thinking about this. They'll just be thinking, Trump is going to turn into this massive fascist that we've been calling him all along, and we have to keep him out of office. This is what the Democrats are going to be gunning up. From day one, the instant he wins the primary, this is going to be the single message that they send out there that he has to lose.
I
Ed,
also think
Ed,
this is going to
Ed,
interfere greatly with his attempts to campaign. If you're fighting an indictment, if you're under criminal charges and trying to have court filings, have court appointments while you're campaigning, that's going to be really difficult to do. And who knows? He might be convicted. He might be convicted, or he might be exonerated by the time the election comes along. So it's really hard to say how this is going to all unfold.
Ed,
Well,
I've
there's
got a question for you, Ed, and it's linked to what we've been discussing in terms of Soros. I mean, classically, liberals were against this, but isn't this like a just zooming out a bit? Isn't this a huge problem where you have someone like Soros, who is basically funding DA officers, funding the DA, who in turn is able to indict the president of the United States or the former president of the United States? Doesn't that demonstrate that he actually essentially has more power than even the president? Isn't that a problem in the entire structure of the United States right at the moment?
I don't think there should be this much money by any one person going into politics. I agree with that. But I mean, you look at Soros, I think he don't contributed over 128 million in the last election cycle. But there's also Republicans like Kenneth Griffin, who's a hedge fund manager as well, donated 72 million to the Republicans. And yeah, it's on both sides. And I think it's toxic. I don't like that much money being in politics whatsoever.
So it's not the
it's
money I'm
bigger than
talking
that.
about, Ed. Money is a separate issue, and you're quite right. It's all about whoever gets the most funding ends up getting elected, and I guess that's another more deeper issue, which I guess we're not going to discuss here, but at this point. But specifically, the fact that you can essentially pay for a DA to be in place, and a DA is there to prosecute, and he can prosecute the president of the United States, is almost giving someone who is unelected a large amount of power, and isn't that a problem?
Yeah, but I mean, he is elected. The DA is elected, so
No,
the money is.
Soros isn't elected himself.
Oh, yes. So I mean, it's been going on for years, where politicians from both sides give money to DAs, and those DAs are in place, and they can prosecute whoever they want as long as they can get a grand jury to agree with them and hand down the indictment.
Yeah, I think, Ed, the issue is that the type of AG that Soros goes after has this same vein of critique. They come in, they lower the standards for criminality, they lower the standards for jail time. They become basically a hands-off prosecutor for serious crimes. It seems to backfire as it has in many of these even blue cities. So we'll have to see how that goes. Let me play this clip real quick.
Yes, please.
A lot of people were hammering DeSantis for not responding this morning. He was asked by a reporter about this, and here was his reply.
Extradition to New York.
So I've seen rumors swirl. I have not seen any facts yet, and so I don't know what's going to happen. But I do know this: the Manhattan District Attorney is a Soros-funded prosecutor, and so he, like other Soros-funded prosecutors, they weaponize their office to impose a political agenda on society at the expense of the rule of law and public safety. He has downgraded over 50% of the felonies to misdemeanors. He says he doesn't want to even have jail time for the vast, vast majority of crimes. And what we've seen in Manhattan is we've seen the crime rate go up, and we've seen citizens become less safe. And so you're talking about this situation with, and look, I don't know what goes into paying hush money to a porn star to secure silence over some type of alleged affair. I can't speak to that. But what I can speak to is that if you have a prosecutor who is ignoring crimes happening every single day in his jurisdiction, and he chooses to go back many, many years ago to try to use something about porn star hush money payments, that's an example of pursuing a political agenda and weaponizing the office. And I think that that's fundamentally wrong. I also think it's important to point out, when you're talking about these Soros-funded prosecutors, Yes, they may do a high-profile politicized prosecution, and that's bad, but the real victims are ordinary New Yorkers, ordinary Americans in all these different jurisdictions, that they get victimized every day because of the reckless political agenda that these Soros DAs bring to their job. They ignore crime and they empower criminals, and that hurts people. It hurts a lot of people every single day. These Soros district attorneys are a menace to society, and I'm just glad that I'm the only governor in the country that's actually removed one from office during my.
So that was his comments there. A little swipe there at Trump, just calling out the specific charges there, and then also just talking about. I think he pivoted instead of talking because the questions around are you going to refuse extradition, right? And he said, I really don't want to get involved with this, but I don't know what these details are, but I do know, and he pivoted towards the Soros AG angle as well.
I think that was masterful. I feel like that was actually a pretty masterful answer. He managed to address the issue. Sorry. Managed to address the issue. I think he managed to get a subtle dig in at Trump, and he managed to give himself a pat on the back at the same time, while kind of not necessarily coming across as doing exactly that. I think that was pretty good.
Yeah. So Jim, let me ask you a question along those lines, because I know you worked in politics. You've done that for a long time. There have been a lot of people that have been absolutely just, hitting DeSantis on this statement today, saying that it wasn't hard hitting enough and that he was sort of backing away from his principles for political reasons. And it seemed to turn a lot of people off. Is that sort of the feeling you get?
I don't understand why people expect DeSantis to defend a man who has smeared him as a groomer.
Exactly.
It's absurd. I mean, if people are going to say, right, that because of one remark, the porn star remark, that DeSantis shouldn't be taken as a serious candidate, that he's disqualified himself, what about the stuff that Trump has said in the past 6 years? If you're going to set these standards, shouldn't they apply to everyone, not just DeSantis? It's kind of absurd how people hold Donald Trump in such a low standard that he can just get away with saying anything he wants. But the instant DeSantis lashes out just one time, and I agree he shouldn't have lashed out. I think he should have kept that remark to himself. But just the one time, and suddenly it's disqualifying. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I think. By the way, this actually proves how touchy people are. I think his relating the issue, but he was bringing up the terminology porn star. What he was talking about, clearly from my perspective, is how stupid it is that Alvin Bragg's all worried about payments to a porn star, and certainly it's a mild, throw at Trump to some degree. But I found it actually as supportive of Trump more than harming him. I think that Ron DeSantis is one of the most effective political communicators that we have on the scene right now, as nearly as effective as Donald Trump in his boorish manner. And in other ways, much more effective. Like they each are strong in different ways. Ron DeSantis made a perfect response to this because it allowed him to stay above the fray and not get into it. It allowed him to defend Donald Trump in a manner, which, by the way, he rightly should have done because this is a political prosecution and he knows it. And he knows as well as anyone. And then to also give credibility to things that he has done by pointing out how he took out a Soros-funded Tampa district attorney, which thank goodness he had the ability to do, because his point is correct that these most of these Soros-funded people are causing devastation in the communities where they work.
Right. Let me ask Mike. I want to bring you in here because obviously a lot of people do think that the porn star remark was a jab at Trump, just a little bit, just politically motivated. What about the grab her by the genitals comment in 2016 that didn't seem to hurt Trump at all in the general election for the most part? Hillary thought it was going to be the nail in the coffin. It was the October surprise. I think it came out like a week before the election. I mean, does this really seem like it would be anything more harmful than that?
And you're talking about me, Mike, I presume.
Yes, sir.
Is that, yeah, okay, sorry. All right. So, Yeah, I mean, I see this as being very different in the sense that that tape was a classic sort of political hit. It's in some sense it's dirty, but in some sense it's fair play. Here you have something altogether different, which is the invocation of rule of law. A rule of law predicate is that's a nuclear bomb. I mean, that's something you can't fight. You've got a state monopoly on on force and prosecution on those things. You can defend yourself if somebody says, "Oh, there's this tape that drops," and you said grab them by the X. You can't defend yourself if a process. I mean, you can defend yourself in the court, but if you're in a hostile jurisdiction like New York City, and as was noted at the outset of this call, with that 98, 99% indictment rate, that famous you can indict a ham sandwich. This is dirty on a level that our country, as I noted before, we've had presidents assassinated in this country multiple times. We've never had a president indicted by a representative of our own legal system. But again, I do think this discussion right now is very much at the retail level of politics. By looking at what by sort of classifying this as sort of the odd eccentricities of a single aggressive prosecutor in metropolitan New York. I think that is very retail. That's very downstream of what's really happening here, and I think broadening that conversation would probably benefit a lot of listeners.
What do you
Hey,
think
Nick.
is really happening? I'm curious to know.
I think this ties into the DeSantis situation, and then I'll turn it over, and if you want to go to Nick, but you have a foreign policy establishment who is hyper fixated on stopping their loss of control over the domestic drivers of foreign policy. One of the reasons I think that you would not see this done to DeSantis, what's being done to Trump, and by the way, I'm not making a judgment about DeSantis versus Trump on this, but is because I think that given that DeSantis sponsored legislation while he was in Congress for support for Ukraine, even though he has made statements somewhat to the contrary recently, DeSantis would not materially interfere with the foreign policy establishment's play vis-a-vis NATO and the natural gas market. And I think that what's happening here is very similar to what happened in the 2019 impeachment. I mean, does anyone really think that it was the that the impeachment of Trump over the Ukraine call was just a single heroic act by Alexander Vindman, and the rest of the process just played out in a completely dispassionate and no, I mean, this Vindman was backed by the exact same. I mean, the Biden family ran the Ukraine policy for the Obama administration. They were in charge of that portfolio. Joe Biden was giving it was